What if I told you there's a book so controversial that its author had to live in hiding for over a decade, protected by government bodyguards, with a literal death sentence hanging over his head? A book that sparked riots, book burnings, and diplomatic crises across the globe. A book that some say pushed the boundaries of free speech so far that even liberals questioned whether the author had gone too far. Today, we're diving into one of the most polarizing novels ever written, a story so explosive that its very existence changed the course of literary history and put its creator's life in mortal danger. But here's the twist. The part that caused all this chaos? It's actually less than 15% of the entire book. So buckle up, because we're about to explore a literary powder keg that's part magical realism, part religious satire, and part immigrant experience, wrapped up in over 500 pages of dense, symbol-heavy prose that will either leave you in awe or reaching for the aspirin. Our tale begins in the most dramatic way possible, with two men falling out of an exploding airplane at 30,000 feet. But this isn't your typical survival story. Oh no, we're dealing with magical realism here, so naturally, our protagonists don't just survive, they transform. So meet Gibreel, Farishta, and Saladin, Chamcha, two very different men with one thing in common. They're both running away from India, albeit for completely opposite reasons. Gibreel, whose birth name was actually Ismail Najmuddin, started life as a poor orphan but clawed his way up to become Bollywood's golden boy, specializing in playing gods and angels on the silver screen. Ironic, considering what happens next. He was living a double life, the divine embodiment of goodness on camera, but a secret philanderer off-screen. Then something happened that shattered his faith entirely. After miraculously surviving a near-fatal fall during a movie shoot, Gibreel had what you might call a crisis of faith. He'd prayed for a sign from God and gotten nothing. When he was healed, it came after he'd already decided God didn't exist. So what does a man who's made a career playing divine beings do when he loses his faith? He goes on an epic pork-eating binge at the Taj Hotel, of course. It's there he meets Alleluia Cone. Yes, that's actually her name, a mountain climber who'd conquered Everest. And just like that, Gibreel vanishes from the film industry, leaving behind broken contracts and confused fans, all to chase after this woman and start fresh. Now, Saladin Chamcha is Gibreel's complete opposite. Born into wealth, he spent his entire life trying to shed his Indian identity like an uncomfortable skin. To him, being Indian was a curse, a backward existence he needed to escape. His father was a philanthropist and philanderer. His mother died choking on a fishbone. And when Dad remarried less than a year later, Saladin was done. He fled to England, married an English woman named Pamela, and did everything possible to become more British than the Brits themselves. But here's the cruel irony. When he returned to India to perform in Shaw's The Millionaires, his carefully cultivated English accent instantly reverted to its Indian origins the moment he opened his mouth. Identity, it turns out, isn't so easily discarded. Aha! So here we have our unlikely duo on flight AI 420 to London. One man fleeing his lost faith, the other his unwanted heritage. Then terrorists hijack the plane. For days, they make demands. The authorities refuse. And finally, a female terrorist decides enough is enough and detonates a bomb. But remember, this is magical realism. Instead of dying, our protagonists fall through the sky and land on the shores of England, transformed. Gibreel becomes an angel, or at least starts turning into one. Saladin, well, he gets the horns, hooves, and fur treatment. He's becoming the devil incarnate. The landing doesn't go unnoticed, and here's where the story gets really dark. Saladin, looking disheveled and unable to prove his citizenship immediately, gets arrested by immigration officers. And Gibreel? He just stands there and says nothing. Doesn't acknowledge knowing Saladin at all. This betrayal becomes the poison that will eventually destroy them both.
I've never met this man in my life.
Saladin ends up in what can only be described as a medical horror show. A hospital where severely transformed humans are kept, possibly for experiments. Meanwhile, Gibreel is taken in by Rosa Diamond, an elderly woman who becomes obsessed with him.
I'm not obsessing.
When Saladin finally escapes and makes it home, His wife Pamela takes one look at his transformed state and rejects him completely. After all, he's supposed to be dead. She's already moved on with Jumpy Joshi, ironically, Saladin's own friend.
Damn!
So, homeless and honestly pretty hideous, Saladin finds a bit of refuge with the Sufyan family. They're Indian immigrants, and they show him the kind of compassion his English wife just couldn't muster. But even in all his desperation, Saladin still thinks of himself as English, not Indian. The man just can't let go of his manufactured identity.
Right now I want to go and drink tea.
All right, so here's where the story gets psychological. Saladin's transformation into a devil-like creature isn't just physical. People actually start having nightmares about him, even though they've never seen him in real life. Evil, it seems, is just way more believable than good. Meanwhile, Gibreel's angelic transformation, it's barely noticeable, and nobody really believes he's anything special. As the narrator notes with a bit of dark humor,
"Here appeared a celestial being, all radiance, effulgence and goodness, larger than Big Ben, capable of straddling the Thames Colossus style, and these little ants remained immersed in drive-time radio and quarrels with fellow motorists."
But Gibreel has his own problems. He's being haunted by Reka Merchant, a married woman who'd been his lover. When Gibreel disappeared, Reka saw newspaper headlines about his vanishing and, not really able to separate the actor from the divine roles he played, she convinced herself he was sending her a message from heaven. She took her children up to the roof of their high-rise and jumped, believing Gibreel the angel would save them. When she realized her mistake during the fall, she cursed him. Now she's an apparition only he can see, driving him slowly insane with visions and voices. These hallucinations transport Gibreel into elaborate dream sequences where he becomes both a prophet named Mahound and the angel Gibreel who visits this prophet. And this is where we get into the really controversial stuff.
Yeah, boy.
In these dreams, Mahound is founding a monotheistic religion in Jahiliya, a desert town full of polytheists. The city council, led by Abu Simbel, offers Mahound a deal. They'll accept his one god if he'll also accept 3 of their goddesses, Lat, Uzza, and Manat, as divine intermediaries. It's a political compromise, really. Mahound only has about 50 followers, half of whom are just tourists, while the people love their traditional gods. Mahound's followers warn him it's a trap. As one puts it,
"If you go up to Coney and come down with such a message, he'll ask, 'How could you make Gibreel provide just the right revelation?' He'll be able to call you a charlatan, a fake."
But Mahound has an interesting response about how he receives divine messages.
"You know, Salman, that I have learned how to listen. This listening is not of the ordinary kind. It's also a kind of asking. Often when Gibreel comes, as if he comes from within my heart, from within my deepest places, from my soul."
Mahound accepts the compromise, but it backfires spectacularly when the goddesses start claiming equality with his god. Chaos erupts, people die, and Mahound realizes he's made a terrible mistake. He returns to Mount Coney, wrestles with the angel, who is also himself, and comes back with a new revelation.
"It was the devil. The last time it was Shaitan. This is what was heard in his listening, that he has been tricked, that the devil came to him in the guise of the archangel, so that the verses he memorized, the ones he recited in the poetry tent, were not the real thing but its diabolic opposite, not godly but satanic."
These false verses become known as, well, you can probably guess where this is going. There's also a fascinating subplot about a scribe named Salman Rushdie. And yes, that name similarity to our author is definitely intentional. This scribe discovers he can change the prophet's words when writing them down, and Mahound never notices.
What finally finished Salman with Mahound, the question of the women and of the Satanic Verses.
Now the third major storyline, well, it involves another Ayesha. Yeah, names get recycled a lot in this book. A young woman who suddenly becomes a religious figure, claiming she's receiving messages from the angel Gibreel. She ends up convincing the entire village of Titlapur to walk all the way to Mecca on foot, promising them they'll even walk across the Arabian Sea itself. But, the pilgrimage turns into a death march, with folks dying along the way. And when they finally reach the sea, most of those pilgrims just walk right in and drown, though the few who survive insist they actually saw the waters part. Meanwhile, back in the main timeline, Saladin's rage at Gibreel's betrayal just keeps festering and growing. He starts plotting his revenge, making these anonymous phone calls to Gibreel, hinting that his lover Alleluia is cheating on him. All that paranoia ends up destroying Gibreel's already fragile mental state. In his madness, Gibreel commits a series of murders in London before returning to India, where the story reaches its climax. Gibreel kills Sisodia, a film director, in a hotel room. Alleluia Cone, the mountain climber who conquered Everest, is found dead after jumping from Gibreel's high-rise apartment, the same building where Reka Merchant had killed herself and her children earlier. And finally, Gibreel commits suicide right in front of Saladin.
God damn!
The devil wins. Saladin gets his revenge, but it costs him everything he thought he wanted. In a moment of perfect irony, Saladin finally accepts himself. He reconciles with his dying father, embraces his Indian identity, and reclaims his full name, Salahuddin Chamchawala. As the narrator puts it,
I am he accepted that I am.
So what book contains this wild mixture of magical realism, religious satire, and immigrant experience? What novel sparked death threats, diplomatic incidents, and global protests? This is the Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie, published by Viking in 1988. All 547 pages of literary controversy. Now, having walked through this labyrinthine story, let's talk about what makes this book so significant and, well, so problematic. First, let's address the elephant in the room. The controversy surrounding this book fundamentally changed how we think about the intersection of art, religion, and free speech. On February 14, 1989, Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa calling for Rushdie's death. The author spent over a decade in hiding under the assumed name Joseph Anton, a combination of Joseph Conrad and Anton Chekhov, living with government-provided bodyguards. But here's what's fascinating. The religious content that sparked all this outrage represents less than 15% of the actual book. The vast majority of the Satanic Verses is a complex meditation on immigration, identity, and belonging. It's about what happens when people try to reinvent themselves in new countries, and how that transformation can be both liberating and destructive. Rushdie's treatment of racism in British society is subtle but cutting. Saladin, despite being a successful actor, is only known for his voice work on radio because, as his employers put it, people weren't ready to see his Indian face on television. When he does appear on the Alien show, he has to wear a mask. It's a perfect metaphor for how immigrants are expected to hide their true selves to be accepted. The magical realism serves multiple purposes here. The literal transformations of Gibreel and Saladin externalize their internal struggles with identity. Gibreel, who made a career playing divine beings, becomes an angel when he loses his faith, but nobody believes him. Saladin, who spent his life trying to become English, becomes a devil and is immediately accepted as such. People, Rushdie suggests, are more willing to believe in evil than good. The book's structure is deliberately challenging. Rushdie weaves together multiple timelines, recurring character names, and dense symbolism that requires serious cultural knowledge to fully appreciate. This isn't a book you read casually. It demands engagement, interpretation, and patience. Is it Rushdie's best work? Probably not. That honor likely belongs to Midnight's children. But the Satanic Verses is undeniably important, not just for what it says, but for what it represents in the ongoing conversation about artistic freedom and religious sensitivity. The tragedy is that the controversy overshadowed the actual literary merit of the work. Critics and readers alike were forced to take sides. You were either defending free speech or respecting religious beliefs, with little middle ground for nuanced discussion. Commenting or writing about it became the route to literary fame by academicians, but the fallout clouded genuine critical analysis. What strikes me most about this book is how relevant its themes remain today. Questions about immigration, assimilation, and identity are more pressing than ever. The tension between secular artistic expression and religious sensibility continues to spark debates worldwide, and the psychological toll of trying to remake yourself in a new culture. That's a universal human experience that Rushdie captures with brutal honesty.
And the hits just keep on coming.
Salman Rushdie himself is a fascinating figure. Born in India, educated in England, a master of post-colonial literature who spent his career exploring the spaces between cultures. He's won virtually every major literary prize, and his influence on contemporary fiction is enormous. But he'll always be remembered as the man who survived a death sentence for writing a novel. The Satanic Verses isn't an easy read. It's dense, complex, and sometimes frustrating. But it's also a remarkable achievement, a novel that dares to tackle the biggest questions about faith, identity, and belonging, wrapped in a story that's by turns hilarious and heartbreaking. Whether you love it or hate it, you can't ignore it, and maybe that's exactly what Rushdie intended. So what do you think? Have you read the Satanic Verses? Do you think artists should have complete freedom to challenge religious beliefs? Or are there lines that shouldn't be crossed? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into controversial literature. Until next time, keep reading dangerously. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you're interested in diving deeper into this book, I've left some links down in the description. You can use it to grab yourself a copy and keep the adventure going. And if you're in the mood for more great reads, don't go just yet. Click on one of the videos popping up right now that I think you'll love. And don't forget to give this review a like, leave a comment, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more. Every bit of support helps us grow this little community of book lovers. See you in the next one.